Hey everyone, so it's time for another YouTube Artist Collective piece, and this time the theme is steampunk. So here are some of my sketches of ideas and thumbnailing and that kind of thing. Here's the finished sketch, and then I printed off a bunch of little mini versions to decide on colors, and then those are my inks, and that is what I will be coloring in this video. I think steampunk is pretty cool, but it's never something I've been really into. I think it looks amazing, but I've never tried drawing it and I've never really researched it. It's just never been one of my major areas of interest. But I was still pretty excited when this was chosen as the theme because it's something new that I get to try. And I wanted to do something a bit different than drawing a human because I almost exclusively draw people and mostly women. And so I was like, well, let's make it a little different here. Let's draw a cat person. And so that is what I did. So I sketched him out, what he would look like, and there was a train in my initial sketches that I showed at the beginning, and that's because I thought I could do this really cool, rusty-looking, steampunky train, and the cat would be hanging out of it or standing on it. I was kind of thinking of what I could do for that, but I decided against that because in the first sketch, when I was planning it out, he had this little flask attached to his belt and there was a fish in it. And I thought I could do a lab setting instead of the train. And what I liked about the lab setting is it gave me the opportunity to draw him full body so you could see his full character design. Whereas if he was, for example, hanging out of the window of a train, you wouldn't see his full body. And I was playing around with some pose ideas where you would see most of his body, but I ultimately liked the lab idea better. So I knew there would be this scientist cat, but he's not an official scientist. He just likes doing these experiments. He has no formal training. He doesn't really have a proper lab. It's kind of just this makeshift area that he put together. It's just an area of interest to him, and he has a lot of spare time on his hands, and so he does weird fish experiments. And initially I didn't really know exactly why. I just thought, okay, he operates on these fish. They're normal living fish, and then he attaches mechanical parts to them, like mechanical fins and that sort of thing, to sort of stick with this steampunk genre. But it was a little morbid because I'm like, well, why is he cutting up these fish? It seems so mean, but he's not a mean character. And then my sister, who I was Skyping with, she said, well, what if he rehabilitates these fish? You know, maybe they're injured and he's rehabilitating them. And I was like, that is such a better idea because it just didn't make sense for him to be this crazy cat that cuts up fish, you know? So that is sort of my mindset. And I kind of had a similar idea to that in mind. Not that he rehabilitates fish, but what I thought of is in How to Train Your Dragon, you know how Hiccup makes that tail piece for Toothless, and it's kind of like leather and it can close up and open. That's what I kept thinking of when I was drawing these fins, because some of them are kind of like plates of metal screwed together, like welded together, but some of them it's more like that accordion type build, if I'm explaining this correctly. And so I kept thinking of how Hiccup made this tail for Toothless. So when my sister mentioned the rehabilitation thing, I was like, well, that makes so much more sense. Like, that's perfect. So yay, thanks, Brooklyn. So what else was I going to talk about? Oh yeah, just now you saw me booping the alcohol onto the paper. That was just Copic colorless blender. You can also use rubbing alcohol, which I do use sometimes. And I just put it in this art syringe. It's blunt. It's not a bad syringe, so don't worry. And I just dab it onto the paper, and it creates this really cool texture effect. And it's a really neat effect for water. It doesn't necessarily mean the water is full of tons of bubbles. It's just a cool texture. And I was considering doing that almost all over the piece, like maybe color his jacket and then do the drops on top and then color over top of that so it's more subtle yet the texture is still there underneath. But ultimately I decided to just do it for the water because I didn't want to overdo it. So it's in the blue water and in the pink water. And by the way, that blue water in the back, that's supposed to be a big fish tank, and then you can see a bit of a countertop in the foreground just to make the composition a little more interesting. So he's just holding up this flask with a mechanical fish in it because it was some kind of breakthrough, or like the fish was gonna die, but it's now alive. Like it was something that was harder to accomplish than usual, and so he's excited about it, and he's holding it up like da 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 da. Look what I did! Look at Simba. He's amazing. That kind of thing. So that's the story behind it, and that's what I like about this is how it's almost like a little storybook page because of how cartoony it is. It's like, I don't know. It's cute. It's like a little book illustration or something. And I know that's different because when I think of the YouTube Artist Collective, which, by the way, when we do that, it's a group of us artists and we all draw something according to the same theme, and then we sell the originals. So when I think of selling these originals, I think of things that are more pretty looking or something that would look good on a wall, maybe in someone's living room or something. I feel like none of my art fits into that living room category, but you know, I feel like people want something pretty that they can hang on their wall to decorate their room with. But this is a bit different than usual because it's, like I said, it's kind of like someone ripped a page out of a storybook, and so it has a different vibe to it. So it is for sale. I don't know if someone's going to want to buy it because it's a little different, but I really like it, and so maybe someone else out there does like it. So if you want to buy the original, it's in my Store Envy store, which I normally don't use anymore, but I still use it for originals whenever the YouTube Artist Collective rolls around. And so if you want to buy the original, the link is in the video description. And then there's also a link to my usual store, which is where you can buy prints of this if you just want a print. One thing I did with this picture is when I was sketching out the thumbnails, I didn't know if my perspective was quite right with how much of the countertop was showing. I didn't know if maybe the counter was too big or too high or just not at the right angle relative to the edge of the fish tank. And so I actually took a picture of my desk. I made sure to angle the camera in the same angle that I envisioned the picture being done. And because my desk has 3 sides, it's kind of U-shaped, it worked. And so that kind of helped me realize, okay, it does work, it does make sense. And so that's kind of how I set up the scene. So I don't know if it's really helpful or interesting, but I thought it might be interesting to you guys. Also, with the fish tank itself, initially I thought I would have some kind of fish tank decorations inside, like maybe a rock with holes in it where they can go inside, or some plants, things like that. And I thought it would just be too distracting, so I decided to make it a little more abstract looking in a sense, where it's just the water and you don't really see how deep the tank is. It's kind of just there. It's meant to be huge, but you know, it's just kind of an unknown when you look at the picture. And then the fact that I colored in a circular pattern for the water was on purpose to bring attention to the flask that he's holding up. So the color is the lightest there, and then it gets darker on the edges. Plus it's round, so that it draws your eyes to the center of the circle. And so that was something I kept in mind with the composition. And one other thing is that items, mostly the fish, most of them are pointing towards that flask. So a lot of the fish are looking up towards it. If you look at the scalpel that's sitting on that tray, it's kind of pointing up in that direction. That's the kind of stuff that I kept in mind when making this, was drawing the viewer's eye to a certain point in the picture. And so, yes. It's fun when I actually get to do those things, because if I'm drawing just a person, there's not much thought behind the composition. Normally, I mean, like, there are times, yes, but a lot of times I'm just like, here's a person's head in the middle of a piece of paper. But when there's an actual scene involved, it gets much more fun to play around with composition and that kind of stuff. So I had fun with it. And the final thing I'm doing here is just adding some details in gel pen. So once again, I'd just like to repeat, if you're interested in purchasing the original or prints, the links will be below. And also linked below will be the other people involved in the YouTube Artist Collective. So you can go check out their videos for the steampunk theme, and you can even head over to the YouTube Artist Collective Facebook page and give it a like if you want to keep updated on all these YouTube Artist Collective themes and stuff like that. So yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in my next video.
Why are you done? Wait.
Okay, it's been a while since I last vlogged. This has been a slow process, but I've